All righty, folks. Congratulations. Snap your fingers. You are now a landlord for this discussion. What Casey and I are going to do is talk about tricks that we have done to try and get some great tenants. The beauty of having Casey on the show is she self manages and I do not. So you're probably going to get different opinions from her and I. But Casey, you are the guest. What are one of the tricks that you do to get great tenants?
First of all, I want to say that all my failures with my rental properties have been regarding my tenants, not the property purchase, not that I bought a bad deal or I didn't do good renovations, did all those things fine. It's always been the tenants, and they're the ones
Mm.
that take care of your property. So I'm always looking for the best ways to get quality tenants and keep them in my property because they're the ones that are taking care of my asset for me. They are the ones. So really when I'm buying a rental, it's like I'm buying tenants. Like, who am I going to get to take care of my house? So I have a few tricks that I try and implement. I'm always keeping in consideration when I'm renting my properties.
Mhm.
And one of them is buy in B class neighborhoods, buy in the better neighborhoods. The better the neighborhood, typically, right, the better quality tenants you're going to get. You know, they can afford more. They can afford more rent because they make more money. They make more money because they have a college degree. They've had some sort of education. They can show that they can keep a job and fulfill their obligations, and they can show up to work on time, and they can do a good job, and they're dependable and reliable, and they get promoted. So the better quality person, in my opinion, you have a better chance of them being more of them in the tenant pool. The better the neighborhood is, the higher the rent price is. So that's one of my tricks: is buy in the better neighborhood so you can capture a better quality tenant.
Yeah, I think locations of properties generally attract different tenant bases. I think that makes a lot of sense. As somebody who doesn't self manage and thankfully has never met a tenant near as I can remember, the big thing I would tell a landlord who has a property manager is never, ever, 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 ever go against the criteria you set up. All of my pain and suffering that has occurred over the last 20 some years, most of the time, and by most of the time, let's say 80% of the time, is because I made some exception on one of my predefined criteria. Now, thankfully, I haven't made an exception in well over 5 years, maybe even 6 or 7 years. But yeah, for the first decade, I'm a big softy. I act like I have a hard candy shell, but I have a gooey center. So I bought every sob story, out there. Don't do that. And thankfully, I don't self manage because that would be extra hard for me. But yeah, don't ever go against the criteria you've established. It's never worked out for me.
I agree. And that's one of my other, my other tips that I have for people is rip out your heart and throw it in a drawer, close the drawer, and now you're ready to take applications
Yeah.
and put a tenant in place. Because again, just like you, Michael, the problems that I've had have been from not having a strict high criteria. In the very beginning, I used to not do credit and background checks because I would say, oh, everyone in this neighborhood's probably got a bad credit score. I don't want to know. And those people have given me the biggest headaches. Another one of mine was no bankruptcies ever.
Hmm.
And of course, I picked a person who had just had a bankruptcy, but she went through a divorce and blah, blah, blah. And so, okay, I get it. She left my place fine, but it was like pulling teeth to get rent paid and to get accurate, good communication and all of that, especially during the pandemic. So it's like whenever I decided that I'm going to slack on my criteria, and sometimes it's because like I'm anxious, like, oh, my property's been on the market for a little bit too long, and maybe I should just pick that next person. Don't, don't, just wait. Have your high criteria. The
Yeah.
people will come. No tenant is better than a bad tenant. And having
Yeah.
the strict criteria. And I'll say, like, for my better quality properties, I do my FICO score minimum is higher. Like in my B class properties or my rent $1,700 a month, your minimum FICO score is not going to be 600. Like I'm not putting someone in my house that has a 600 FICO score. Like not
Yeah.
happening. Like you need to have a better FICO score, and those people are there and they're out there.
Yeah. The other one to talk about again, I have a property manager is at lease renewal, right? One of my jobs and one of the jobs I kind of put on the property manager, again, the property manager knows their job is to qualify tenants. That's a no brainer. But I also put on them to keep great tenants, right? I don't know what the percentages are, but let's say 85% of my tenants are great. Pay on time, call when something's broken, they do the right things. I want to keep all of them, right? And, for a long time before California had rent control, if you were in one of my units and a great tenant, you wouldn't get a rent increase every year. It would be every other year.
Mhm.
And I would always be below market. Now, unfortunately, the king of California has established rent control where now I can't catch up. So now, unfortunately, rent increases happen every year. I do stay below market. I don't take it up, the full amount, but unfortunately, the rules have changed and rent control means that you have to do it every year. But yeah, it's less than market. It's a reward.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
think about lease renewal.
I do the same thing. So for my tenants that I like, first of all, I start off with a 2-year lease
Mm,
because if you already know you want to move out in 1 year, like I don't want you. I
mm.
mean, like, I don't need another month of
That's a
vacancy
good
and to
idea.
do
That's a good
touch-up
idea.
painting and advertise and start moving on the first of next month. Really, like 1 month of vacancy every year, like no. So I do 2-year upfront lease agreements. So if you're cool with 2 years, you'll probably stay longer. My goal is that you
Mm,
stay forever. I would love you to stay forever. So at least 2 years, and then usually they'll stay more. I have someone in there on 2 tenants are on 5 years with
mm.
me, and
That's
they keep the
awesome.
place great. So what I'll do after the 2 years is I'll say, okay, it's been 2 years, you know, time for an increase. And I'll say, look, and now this depends on their rent and the area. So more C class areas, you don't get a lot of rent appreciation, at least out here in Memphis, but the B neighborhoods you do. So B neighborhoods are definitely going to get some sort of increase after year two. But in my C neighborhoods, and if they're great and they pay on time and they keep the place good and they don't smoke or whatever, because I hate that, I'll say, hey, we can do time for a rent increase. Been 2 years. You guys have had a really good deal. I will raise your rent X amount if you do 1 year, but if you do another 2 years, I won't raise your rent.
Oh, there you go.
And they go, well, okay, great. Now after 4 years, you're definitely going to increase. So, because if I'm going to do 2 years and I'm going to increase it $30 or whatever, because it's a C neighborhood, it's not that much money to me. I risk the
Mhm.
chance of them moving out. I really like them and I don't need the extra $30. Like, cool.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. So, depending upon who they are and how they're treating my property, I may increase their rent up almost to market rent, but never enough. I always look at right now competition. What's available
Hmm.
for rent? Because
Hmm.
they're going to say, oh, Casey said we're getting a rent increase. Let's see what else is out there. So they're going to go on Zillow and Realtor and all those places, and they're going to see what else is for rent. Now I'm going to see what else is for rent. Mine is going to be a better value at a better price. So they're like, oh, I don't think we should move. When Casey raises our rent that extra $45, it's still less than what we'll get other places, and our house is better.
Yeah. I guess the last thing for me to talk about tenants is I want to make something clear. Uh, Tenants that never call for repairs, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Some tenants are afraid to call and report small issues. And if you don't fix a small issue, they often become very, very big issues. So my project man or my property manager does a yearly inspection, and they will have those conversations. Like your sink is leaking, or your toilet, or you know the I don't know, the edging of your bathtub is starting to peel. We should really fix that now. Please call us. Yeah, some tenants need to be educated on that.
They
Um,
do.
so I like to make sure there's communication established. So I make sure my property managers inspect them yearly.
I agree. And I will tell you that when I did not inspect as often as I should, that's when I had my problems. And so what I do now is what I will meet with some local. I don't have tons of houses. I can do this. I meet with them at the lease signing with my blue pen, and we're gonna exchange keys and checks and all that. and they've gotten usually their lease agreement in advance to read through, but I go through the most important parts with them verbally.
Nice.
And the things that I really care a lot about, like you're not to paint the inside of my house because it's going to cost me $4,000 to have somebody paint it when you paint the walls blue. So that's a no. You must keep your yard mowed so we don't get fined by the city, and no smoking. And I'll say, look, this is going to be a great relationship. I'm an amazing landlord. I only require a couple of things for this to be a great relationship. One, you pay me on time. Two, you communicate with me. When I call you, text you, email you, you must respond. And three, when there's something wrong, you have to tell me because
Yeah,
this
the
is my
stuff
house.
breaks. Yeah, the
And
stuff
I
breaks.
want to fix it for you. I want to fix it for you. And I want to fix things right now so that they don't cost me more money later on. So if there's a leak or whatever, please tell me right away. We'll fix it. And they go, oh, okay. And that's huge because one time we had a tenant put a bowl underneath the leak, so the overflow pan and the air conditioner and the attic was overflowing because the line was clogged and it was dripping out of the ceiling. They put a bowl under it. It ruined the ceiling, and it not wrong, right? Not just some. And the ceiling was brown, and I'm like, you could have just told me, like, we would have gone out there, we'd have poured some bleach on the thing, we would have got it cleared up, would have sucked all the water out, easy peasy. So, people are afraid. Like, real quick example. One of my husband's friends, he lives in San Diego, and his rent, right, is a really good price. He pays like $3,000 a month. It should be $4,500 a month. So he does not call his landlord for anything. He didn't have a working stove or refrigerator, and he's like, I'm going to figure it out because he knows if he calls his landlord, he's like, oh, sure, we'll fix it. Now we got to increase your rent. And I think the max is like 10% or whatever it is now in California. So he's like, oh, like you really only raised like $330. But a lot of tenants are worried that if you do call your landlord for things, that they're going to raise your rent. It's fairly true. Maybe if you're completely under market rent, okay, now we're communicating time to raise rent. But in a nutshell, it's our house. We want it to stay nice so it doesn't cost us more money in the long term. So I definitely lay that out there with my tenants, and we have that great conversation that we want to fix things. We would love to fix things for you,
That's
not
awesome.
screwing light bulbs, but
Yeah,
so please let us know.
there you go. Well, Casey, you put out a lot of amazing stuff. Where can people find you?
People can find me every day on Instagram at Brick by Brick Wealth, along with YouTube and Twitter and TikTok, all those places.
Awesome. Thank you so much.